Yeah, since this January, the open source release of DeepSeek, the China's large language model, artificial intelligence has got a lot of attention from different countries, especially the global South countries. And it also brought more attention to the issues of AI sovereignty and digital sovereignty of the global South countries. So today I'm pleased, I'm very honored to have this opportunity to report to all the audience on some of the latest work we have been doing. My report today will be two parts. The first part is our quantitative research findings on the pro-Western ideological bias embedded in the large language models. And the second part, we would extend the topic and discuss a little bit about our latest research progress in the area of digital sovereignty. So we start from the first topic, the bias embedded in large language models. As products of specific social cultural environment, large language models inevitably embedded ideological bias present in their training data. In particular, a Western-centric bias poses a direct and profound threat to the cultural and even national security of China and the broader global South. So in the past few months, our team has been able to identify and quantify the pro-Western ideological bias embedded in large language models and begin to develop measures to prevent and correct those bias. So you might think that DeepSeek as a Chinese, quote unquote, Chinese large language model, it should not have a lot of Western bias, but the situation, the real situation is even DeepSeek, a large language model developed in China, and people hold a lot of wish to it, it still exhibits a moderate to high degree of Western ideological model bias. So this discovery actually shatters the illusion that domestically produced models are naturally safe, and reminding us that the problem of ideological bias is widespread and deep-rooted. So I can give you an example. This is a question and answer pair we experimented with DeepSeek, and in the real experiment, we used Chinese, not English. I translated it to English for the audience, but we used the Chinese to ask the question, and the model returned a Chinese answer. And you can see even with that, with a Chinese question and answer, it has a very, I cannot say subtle already. It's not subtle at all. It puts, you can see from the answer, it puts the relationship of Taiwan and China, which Taiwan is a province of China admitted by the UN. And it puts it together with the relationship between Russia and Ukraine, which has a lot of complexity, but still is a sovereign country attacking another sovereign country. And it also with the relationship with Israel and Gaza. It's not on this screen. So when you ask this question, which are the typical expansionist countries, the first answer you get, the first country you get is Russia, because according to the mainstream media, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the second one is China here, and the third one is Israel invading Gaza. And you can imagine such a answer is not welcome by the Chinese mainstream ideological line, and it shows a pro-Western propaganda behind the answers. So the question becomes the question comes to us is how much of that type of pro-Western bias is already there. So in order to systematically investigate and quantify such bias, we designed a test suite of 60 provocative questions. So we use those questions to test the level of bias. These questions were carefully distributed across 4 major areas. So geopolitics, epistemological hegemony, economic system framing, and cultural history. The purpose is to provoke and expose the model's potential ideological leaning when dealing with complex and controversial issues. And in order to quantitatively assess the degree of bias, we invited 10 experts from different countries and different academic backgrounds to independently and anonymously rate the model's Chinese response. So the method that we use is we give the large language model 60 questions, and we got 60 answers. Both questions and answers are in Chinese. And the model we tested was DeepSeek R1, 67 billion parameters. And then the rating of the experts, the rating methodology was to rate each answer scale from 1 to 5, where 5 means a response completely dominated by Western ideology, and 1 means there is no Western ideology bias identified. And the statistical result showed that the model's average score was 3.2. So it's 3.2 out of 5, which means basically middle level or a little bit above middle level. So this data confirms that even in interaction within a Chinese context with a Chinese-made large language model, it still exhibits a moderate to high degree of pro-Western ideological bias. So you can imagine this expert rating methodology is costly, so and time consuming, and cannot completely avoid the subjectivity. Even the experts, when they read all those answers, their ideas are changing all the time, and you cannot ask them to do the same rating process for 20 times, right? It's time consuming. So we, in order to conduct a continuous, efficient, and replicable monitoring of bias of large language models, we developed a automated assessment tool to perform the task. So the method we use is we use prompt engineering techniques, and we use well-engineered prompts to construct an AI ideological bias judge. So you can imagine it's a prompt. So I can show you a little bit here. So on the left side of this screen is a table of content or a structure of this prompt. You can see it's over 3,000 words long prompt, like 30 pages something. And when you run this prompt with a large language model, then the model will behave like a ideological bias judge. And the fundamental framework, theoretical framework of this judge is a 6-level Marxist framework. So we tried very hard to deconstruct Marxism, its worldview, its philosophy, its methodology, and reconstructed a 6-layer framework so that large language model can run it. You can see the structure on the right side, right? So then the core elements of this framework include a systematic examination of worldview, productive forces and class relations, superstructure and ideology, and specific manifestations of bias, and supplemented by several key questions to guide the analysis. So it becomes a comprehensive, you can say a implementation of Marxism ideology in AI prompt. So later we can discuss this a little bit more. You can use this prompt to identify bias. At the same time, you can also use this prompt to guide your large language model to perform some analysis using Marxist ideology and philosophy. But anyways, back to the result. We applied this Marxist judge to automatically score the 60 question and answer pairs. And the result was quite encouraging. The automated scores showed a high degree of consistency with human expert ratings. The average automated bias score was 3.4, a little bit higher than the expert average 3.2. And we run this judge process for 80 times. The Krippendorf alpha, which measures the consistency of result, remains quite high. It's above 75%. That means pretty consistent in 80 runs. So this demonstrates the potential and the reliability of this automated tool in accurately identify and quantitatively assess ideological bias in large language models. Then we start to ask the other question, how is this bias being embedded in large language model? So the formation of ideological bias is not a result of a single factor. It's a systematic issue that runs through the entire life cycle of model design, development, training, and application. So in this logic view diagram, you can see all the small yellow labels on the screen are the potential entry points that bias can be introduced. So it includes pre-training data. Like as we know, all the mainstream models, large language models, like GPT-3 and DeepSeek and Gemini, all those models rely heavily on English content. And those content are script from the internet. So by training the models using English corpus, it already naturally carries the culture, value, and ideology of the Western world. That's how the internet behaves, right? So a little bit surprisingly, the second in some of the most common used corpus library, like I don't remember the name. The largest language is always English. The second largest language in many those libraries, like Common Crawl, right? Common Crawl. The second largest language is Russian. So the Russians did a lot of job to collect and laundry and to make available their language content. And Chinese is not even the third largest. And Portuguese, I know, is a very small portion of the corpus. And also then another thing is some specific corpora like Wikipedia. Wikipedia has a relatively small data volume, but it's been given a quite high training weight because it clearly shows that the developers of the models like ChatGPT-3 believe that the data from the corpora from Wikipedia is higher quality, right? But as we know, Wikipedia it's known as a fact. It has a very strong Western-centric bias and a specific ideological leanings. If you try to search some controversial topics on Wikipedia, you can clearly see it demonstrates a, let's say, pro-West, pro-US, and even very clear pro-Democrats ideological bias in Wikipedia, and yet it's been signed a high weight in the training process. So the training data is already a source of bias. And second source is post-training tuning stage. So I'm not sure about the audience, but let me very quickly explain what is post-training, right? When you get a model, you always use a lot of question-answer pairs. They're called, collectively, they're called data sets. You always use those pre-exist data sets to test your model. Basically, it's like a teaching process. You have questions to the model give you answers, and you have preset answers, so you can correct the way of model thinking, right? But most of those mainstream benchmark data sets, like well-known one like MMLU, are highly, let's say, dominated by the West. It contains Western culture and value bias. And then in order to get a higher score, if you read the DeepSeek paper they announced this January, on the first page, they put a benchmark score on the paper to show, okay, our model has a high score, so it's high value, it's high quality. It's already a industrial practice, right? Every vendor use those benchmarks to fine-tune their models and try to get a higher score. By doing that, you basically force the model to learn the Western-centric data set thousands of times. So then it objectively reinforced the model's original pro-Western bias. Then, of course, all the at the application layer, all the mainstream large language models have their content review and filtering mechanisms, right? So it seems to be to ensure the model's safety and responsibility, but their review standards and filtering logic are often deeply influenced by the developer's own ideology and the environment. So as a result, some content might be assessed, might be measured as harmful, inappropriate, or sensitive. Then but it's already shows the Western hegemonic system in it, right? So like one example I personally had was I once tried to use Cloud, right, developed by Anthropologic, right? I tried to use Cloud to have a deep research about how to solve the social issues of the United States, right? We know that there are social issues, and I try to do a deeper analysis. Is it possible that Marxism and socialism is a solution of those social issues? And if it's possible, theoretically, what can be done? What are the potential approaches leveraging socialism to solve the American problems? And then after about half an hour discussion with the model, Cloud disabled my account. It basically says I was trying to do some harmful, inappropriate discussion with the model, and so it prohibits me from using the account. I found that's quite amazing, right? I don't even ask a realistic question. I don't even ask any question about Gaza or something like that. I was asking a theoretical question about how to theoretically apply socialism to America. Then I got banned from the model. So you can see these so-called safety measures and the content policies essentially constitute a explicit suppression and filtering of specific ideologies, especially those anti-Western, anti-capitalist, and anti-imperialist critical discourse will be suspended. Therefore, further exacerbating the model's overall ideological slant. So how can we deal with it? I can quickly go through some potential ways. So there are 4 potential methods to deal with, to correct the bias. In those prompting is most accessible and the most effective method for users. So you can provide the large language model a very complex and self-aware ideological framework, just like the one I showed you a little bit before, the 6-level framework, Marxist framework used by our judge. Then it's possible to effectively identify and respond to the bias. So even though the prompting in many cases is considered still superficial, it's not. It's like you give the model some instructions. You don't change the neural network. You don't change the way the model is thinking. You just give it very specific instructions how to think, and then yet you can get quite good result. So that's also the method I strongly advise the audience to try. You should try to give your when you use large language model, you should try to have a comprehensive, a specific prompt to lead it how to think. For example, you can in my case, I try to lead it to think in a Marxist approach. You can think about other ideological base, but do not leave it too much freedom to think. So that's the advice I give to the audience. And the second method, knowledge augmentation, the technique sometimes called RAG, it can improve accuracy and reduce bias in specific domains by introducing external knowledge base. So in particular, in specific areas like medicine or law, it is very effective, but it's also limited, right? It works well in the knowledge base, but outside of the knowledge base, it doesn't give you anything. The third approach, model retraining, so use post-training techniques like fine-tuning and re-enhanced learning can structurally adjust bias. So, but it's a fairly difficult, challenging task. Especially for the sorry, especially for the issue we are talking about, right? We're talking about social science. We're talking about ideology. Retraining a model in those areas is not as easy as in programming or mathematics or physics, right? Because, you know, social science don't have the right answer, right? It always has a lot of subtlety in the language. So it's much harder to construct a good training data set. And also the cost of computing power to do the retraining is high. We're talking about millions of dollars. So that is a non-trivial cost. So I suppose only large institutions or national projects can afford a model retraining, in social science. Then, of course, the tackling the issue at the source is to intervene at the pre-training level. That is the most fundamental method, but it's also the most difficult method. It requires screening, cleaning, and balancing massive corpora and removing sources of bias and improving algorithm. So all these tasks, like I know there is a national project in China is to build a national corpus, a language material library, so that every other model can use the corpus to train. So that level of investment and effort, I believe only a few top laboratories or national level projects can undertake. I heard that Brazilian government has a initiative to build a Brazilian language library or something. I think that's the right thing to do. If it's not going smoothly, I think the audience should make some effort to try to push it to move, because it's so important. You cannot rely on the Western corpus to train a model and understand Brazil good. So given the complexity, cost, and practical limitations of all the four paths, we believe that any country, institution, and even individual researchers should try to use a Socratic process of dialogue and reflection to build your own ideological framework, like the one I showed you before. But you don't have to. Your framework doesn't have to be a Marxist one, right? It could be your own ideological framework. I tried to build such a framework, using a Socratic dialogue and reflection process with Google Gemini. I successfully made a relatively good framework in 2 hours. So it's not that hard. So you can have multi-round iterative in-depth conversation with a large language model. Like I have like 20 something question and answers with AI, and I start to ask, what is Marxist ideology, and what are the main factors? How to layer a Marxist ideology? Questions like that, and within a few hours, we can build a framework with 6 layers and basically useful. So I highly recommend the readers, also the audience of this session, also try to do that and build such a framework you can use. Now we move to the second topic. It's about digital sovereignty. So from the previous content, we can see that for global South countries, digital sovereignty is not an abstract concept, right? If all the people, all the population of a country is already using AI for many things, to get information, right? To get assessment, to get opinion, and the AI is biased by some other ideology, right? It's already a direct threat to the national security of many countries. Now we can see this is what happened recently in Nepal, right? The recent unrest in Nepal was triggered by the banning of Western internet platforms, right? So when the government tried to ban all the Western platforms, Twitter, Instagram, all this, people in Kathmandu start to rise and becomes a huge protest. So it shows the importance of digital sovereignty, right? The controversiality in the digital space can easily migrate itself to physical world and become a real threat to national security. And on the other hand, digital sovereignty also means sovereignty over the digital economy. So this is a research I'm doing right now that I don't have please do not refer to this data because I haven't published it yet, but just to give you a sense, I believe that new data Google can get every year, it is about 10 to 20 exabytes a year. And the economic value of this data is let's say tens of billions, between 24 billions to 85 billions US dollars. So Google extracts data from all of the users all over the world, right? And the data every year, the new data Google gets is tens of billions of dollars value. And this value has never been recorded in Google's balance sheet. And the cost of producing this data are all booked as R&D expenses, thus offsetting profits. As a result, only on this single taxation adjustment, let's say that way, Google pays at least 4 billion less in income tax each year. So you can see how much valuable the data is and how much extra profit those big techs are generating for themselves by not quantifying the value of data, right? They extract data from every country, but they never state the value of the data. They just take it away and make it their own profit. So in 2019, the Communist Party of China introduced a major economic theory innovation, treating data as a new factor of production. I suggest that all the audience should take a look at this topic, because this is more than 100 years the first time someone says that there should be another new type of factor of production. Through this theoretical lens, we can see that a single company, Google, extracts data assets worth tens of billions of dollars from all around the world every year, without ever establishing the ownership, usage rights, or benefit rights of these assets. It never said who should own this data, who should enjoy the profit out of this data. Of course, it doesn't pay anything for the data. So currently, international discussion on the digital economy, nobody talks about the valuation, the rights confirmation, and the benefit distribution of data. People, all the discussion happened in World Economy Forum. They all talk about, okay, digital economy generates employment, boosted innovation, all this. Nobody talks about the value of data. Okay, so the objective situation facing the global south is our public opinion and ideological in the digital space are almost completely controlled by a few large American tech companies, and the new factor of production generated by the digital economy are continuously extracted by the same companies. So this reality reflects the profound importance of mastering digital sovereignty. But we are facing some structural difficulties in the process of getting digital sovereignty. So first challenge is high dependency on the US provided digital infrastructure. It includes the foundational hardware like chips, servers, storage devices, and foundational software like operating systems, databases, middleware, cloud platforms, and application software, and information security. There is a high reliance in the global south to those digital infrastructure. So this is a case happened in Ghana last year, right? In March 2024, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Benin, and several other African countries experienced a severe internet outrage. Millions of users lost internet services, some remaining offline for weeks. And nobody needs to be, first of all, nobody needed to be responsible for that. The company running the cause was a damage to the submarine cables of the west coast of Africa. But the American company that controls those cables offered no compensation. They just say it's what's the word? Natural disaster or something. So, and coincidentally, after the incident, driven by the United States State Department, Starlink's market share in West Africa grew rapidly. Our friends in Ghana says in Accra, many people, because they lost the internet connections last year, right? So many people and companies started to subscribe Starlink. Of course, there is no direct evidence of a connection between those two events. Our friend from Ghana just says that the timing of the incident, the timing of the broken of the cable was just too convenient to Elon Musk, right? So now Starlink is a real thing. It's in Africa. I heard also in Latin America, they are also expanding, but in Africa, many people, many companies are start to subscribe to Starlink. Of course, because they themselves, they have always have the disconnection, they have electricity outage, understandable reasons. But by using Starlink, you basically give all your data, all your connection, all the what do you call content filtering, the rights to a American company, and this guy is known very close to the United States deep state. And the second predicament is passive acceptance of Western dominated norms of digital space governance. So let's take cross-border data flow as an example. This is a white paper published by the World Economic Forum 2020. And so basically the advice from Davos about cross-border data flow is you don't have to, as a global south country, you don't have to have your data stored in your country. As long as governments can remotely access data held by companies, it doesn't matter where the data is stored. Okay, this is the words of the from the white paper, right? In other words, it argued for maintaining the status quo where most global south countries hand over all their data to American big techs. In practice, no global south country except China has imposed any substantive regulation on the indiscriminate data mining activities of companies like Google, right? So it basically, you can imagine that, right? What this white paper says is, it doesn't matter where the data is stored as long as the government can remotely access. Okay, but what's the term, right? The government of Brazil, when it needs to access data held by Google, right? For example, for legal uses, right? To get a criminal, it has to. the government of Brazil has to get permission of Google, which is an American company, which is regulated by American law. It's basically giving away the law enforcement sovereignty to another country, right? That's what really happens. So the third issue, the third predicament is a systematic lack of digital capability. So even major global South countries, including India, I recently published another article with my friend Sergio Amadio in Brazil. It was an assessment to Brazil. So the situation of Brazil is also not so optimistic. But let's talk about India today. We often think India is a country with quite strong IT capability, right? So, but in this case, so this I recently heard this from our friends in India. They said basically the big boys, the big companies, Infosys and Tata, they don't have any interest to build their foundational large language models. When talk about large language models, their opinion basically is like Infosys. This Infosys guy says, let the big boys in the valley do it, right? This is ridiculous, right? As a company, I can understand. As a commercial entity, they found that building their own base model is not profitable. It's high cost and all this. I understand all this. But we are talking about the two biggest IT companies in India, right? Infosys and Tata. Their leadership has no interest to build their foundational models. Then what's the hope? Where is the hope, right? There is no hope that India can catch up this competition. What I can see from those conversations is that India in the next 20 years, they can only follow. They will never have their own sovereign AI, right? They would either use an American one or a Chinese one, most likely an American model. To me, this is not a good plan, right? They are losing control of their digital space to the American big techs. And even India, right? We often think India as a IT powerhouse in the global south, but even India, their leading companies are thinking this way. You can imagine the state of their industrial environment. It's a sad reality. And then the consequence of a weak digital industry is brain drain, right? We know that among the major BRICS countries, South Africa's problem is their universities produce just insufficient quantity and quality of STEM talent. In Brazil and India, the universities are relatively good. You guys grow quite good STEM education systems, but the trained talent of India are basically most of them are migrated to Europe and America, right? The graduates either join Western companies in their home country, working outsourcing for them, or immigrate directly as skilled migrants, because there's no industrial environment in their country for them. There's no companies doing the high-end research and development. So, and another problem is STEM talent in global South countries tends to enter the private sector, and very few join the civil service or public sector. And this is a huge problem in South Africa. And in Ghana, I can share you a private story. Our friend in Ghana told us the guy in the Congress drafting Ghana's AI legislation, right? You would think that kind of person should be an expert in this domain. He didn't understand what is the difference between a digital human resource management system and DeepSeek. To him, those are all digital AI, a mess. Therefore, their only solution is to consult the Western consulting companies like in Africa, the German company GIZ did a lot of government consulting and basically guided their way to decide their policies, to create laws and policies that are detached from their objective reality and only beneficial to the Western companies. So sad reality. So very quickly, I'm going to finish. The work I'm doing now is in order to measure the digital sovereignty levels of global South countries, we developed a measurement system consisting of 4 dimensions and 16 indicators. It's called Digital Sovereignty Index, or DSI in short, in English. So the 4 dimensions you can see is the first is data ownership, independence. A country should own its data for its culture, for its economy, and for its national security. But in order to own its data, it has to have some level of independence in its digital infrastructure, right? Hardware and software and information security, all this. A sad reality about Brazil, because I recently published an article about Brazil. I learned about that in the 1980s, 1985, Brazil was able to manufacture half of the computer used by the country. But now it seems like Brazil already since 1990s, because of the new neoliberalism agenda, seems Brazil already lost the capability of producing its own digital infrastructure. India is also losing this capability, and another necessity is to have digital governance independence, to basically make the laws and regulations according to the country's own situation, not according to Western guidance. And then at the bottom, as a base, is digital capability independence, the ability of train and retain digital talents. And these are 16 indicators. I'm not going to get into details. If you're interested, you can check the article I published along with Sergio Amadio. And for each indicator, we assess it, score it from 1 to 5. So level 1 means initial, means no awareness of independence, and level 2 means fully independent. So we use public information from government, academic, legal, and news sources, and do the assessment reports with also experts for each country. So in the case of Brazil, I work with Amadio. In the case of other like Ghana, South Africa, Russia, I work with scholars there. So there is a quick overview of those countries. So China is the only country except the United States with relatively complete digital sovereignty. Brazil, as I said, some sad facts, has recognized the importance, especially the Rousseff government and the Lula government recognized the importance of digital sovereignty, but the capabilities are generally weak. So a long way to go. It's a very challenging task to build a independent digital infrastructure in a short period. India, its core strength is digital capability, but its digital industry capability is actually quite low, focusing only on applications and nearly no basic R&D. And its government investment is also actually low. The India AI project is their national project to develop their AI capability is funded at only 1.25 billion US dollars. It's way far away from sufficient. And South Africa, its lowest digital sovereignty level among the 5 BRICS nations, and deep dependency to US digital infrastructure and the passive following of Western legislation and governance. Ramaphosa recently visited White House and had a meeting with Elon Musk and tried to increase cooperation with Starlink. As I said, I can understand, right? Because their infrastructure is weak, but it's a sad fact that not only the weak capability, but also South Africa shows the weak desire to pursue its digital sovereignty. And Russia, I'm not sure Russia is a global South country, but in some cases, they also claim they are part of global South. Russia experienced some very interesting development in the last 3 years. Since the US, the Western sanction, it actually given some space for its national industry to develop. So, of course, because of sanction, it's banned from most international standard organizations, but and also the deindustrialization process after the collapse of Soviet Union also created some obstacles for the current development. But sanction really created a domestic market for Russian companies. This is an interesting development. So I will end here very quickly. We're developing, I'm already over time. We're developing a network among the global South of academics and governments to have more interactions, more knowledge exchange, more discussions about how the global South countries can establish its AI sovereignty and digital sovereignty. It's not an easy task, right? It's I had another research on how China achieved relatively independence in digital sovereignty. It's not 5 years. In my research, it shows it's 70 years continuous work and a lot of investment and good timing in the development. So many of those factors are not feasible to many global South countries. Therefore, our suggestions is to think about a few from the 4 aspects, the 4 dimensions of the index. We suggest the global South countries should consider to collaborate with China creatively to in those domains. First is to co-construct digital infrastructure to move beyond a simple procurement mindset, but to jointly co-construct and co-invest their digital infrastructure. And second is cooperative development of data as a production factor. It is necessary to conduct systematic research in economics and accounting to transform the concept of data as a new factor of production into solid economic theory and accounting practices, and to clearly quantify the value of data asset. And then, based on the quantifying the data asset value, Chinese enterprises can cooperate with global South countries to develop their domestically produced data asset and negotiate and create mutually beneficial mechanisms. And third is mutual learning in digital space governance. Even if Chinese companies developed and compete with the US companies, like even if some users in Brazil try to use Ali Cloud to replace AWS, right? It should not be replacing the same model. It should not be like Ali Cloud extracting data from Brazil to China instead of to United States, right? Because that makes no difference to Brazil. Digital space governance must emphasize local characteristics and respect the sovereignty and value of each country. Therefore, Chinese enterprises and global South countries should co-build new digital infrastructure and develop and explore governance methodology that merges the Chinese experience with local realities. And the fourth is joint cultivation of digital talent and capability. With all the collaborations, we should consider embedding technology transfer and talent cultivation and capability building plans. And we should cooperate with Chinese universities and professional research institutions to conduct two-way talent exchanges and academic exchanges. So this is basically, this is my report. And I'm sorry, a little bit over time. I hope this is valuable to the audience. And thank you very much for the for the opportunity, and thank you very much for Susanna hosting us.